Clean the floor, maid. That's what Arabella shouted, laughing loudly while filming with her phone. And everyone heard it. Everyone saw it. But no one did a thing. Loralei Boone was there, on her knees, bleeding in silence. Just another victim of a cruel trap inside the Halden mansion, a place where no maid lasted more than a week. But that day, something different happened. She didn't lower her head. She didn't stay quiet. What she said in return brought the entire mansion to a halt. And the millionaire, the man used to being feared, trembled. What no one knew is that this quiet young woman was hiding a secret. And when the fire started, literally, everything changed. This story will give you chills from beginning to end. We have a goal to reach. Let's double our subscribers. Hit that subscribe button now. They say every wealthy town hides a mansion where luxury is just a facade, a trap dressed up as glamour. In the Hamptons, that house had a name, the Halden Mansion. Surrounded by perfectly trimmed gardens, marble columns, and windows that seemed to smile a high society, it was the postcard image of people who had everything except empathy. Inside, though, the story was different. Maids walked in with flawless resumes and hope in their hearts, but walked out just days later with red eyes, crushed pride, and a warning. It's not worth it. Because in that house, whoever cleaned the floors also carried the weight of humiliation. What caused so much fear? Two girls, twins, blonde, sarcastic, and ruthless. Arabella and Odette Halden, daughters of millionaire Ephraim Halden, were experts at turning any job into a nightmare. They had a gift for hurting without touching, for destroying without raising their voices. They played mind games, hid valuables to accuse innocent people, filmed embarrassing moments, and laughed like it was the highlight of their day. And her father? Always absent. Always too busy to notice that the empire he built on the outside was rotting from the inside his own home. Every maid who passed through there had horror stories to tell. One said the twins poured shampoo on the staircase just to watch her slip. Another was accused of theft and nearly arrested. Until it came out, it was all a setup. A few tried to sue, but lawyers paid with obscene amounts of money turned pain into silence. No one lasted. No one made it through that house without scars. Until one day, a girl showed up who didn't match the setting. Sun-kissed skin, a worn-out backpack, steady footsteps, and a name no one there had heard before, Loralei Boone. Loralei showed up with her hair tied back any old way, worn sneakers, and a modest resume. When the housekeeper interviewed her, she hesitated. "Do you know what you're getting yourself into?" she asked. Loralei didn't blink. "I do, but I need this job." And there it was, the truth no one else could see. She wasn't just a young woman looking for work. She was a desperate sister. Her younger sibling, Ella, was undergoing treatment for a rare illness, and every dollar from that job was what kept the next doctor's visit possible. That mansion may have been known for chewing people up, but Loralei had already been chewed up by life. From her very first step inside the Halden mansion, Loralei felt the weight in the air. It wasn't just arrogance. It was a kind of disdain that seemed soaked into the walls. The other employees watched her like someone walking into a minefield. And she understood. She knew she'd have to put up with things that weren't in the contract. But there was something in Loralei's eyes no one else caught. A quiet strength. A mix of fear and courage. She knew exactly why she was there. She knew she needed that job, but she had no idea what that place would do to her. On her first day, the twins walked right past her like she was a piece of furniture. No hello, not even a glance. On the second day, they were already whispering and laughing while she cleaned the windows. By the third, one of them tossed a piece of fruit on the floor and waited. Loralei calmly bent down, wiped it up, and kept going. It wasn't the first time she'd been treated like she didn't exist. Since she was a kid, she'd learned to stay quiet so she wouldn't lose the little she had. But in that house, silence was seen as weakness. And when they realized she wouldn't react, they decided to go further. The problem is they went too far. Ephraim Halden barely noticed her. He floated between Zoom meetings, business dinners, and endless calls. The kind of millionaire who sees numbers, not people. To him, Maid were just background machinery. As long as the house is clean, we're good, he'd say. What he didn't know was that, in that exact moment, he was opening the door to one of the biggest lessons of his life. Because Loralei wasn't just another housekeeper. She was a woman with a secret, a wound, and a strength he had never encountered, but that soon enough would be on every headline in the country. As days went by, Lorelei started noticing little things that didn't feel right. Locks inside cabinets. Anonymous notes slipped into uniform pockets. Nasty comments whispered behind her back. It was like the mansion had its own hidden rules, a silent game designed to test how far you could push someone from the bottom. She barely slept, afraid of losing the job. But every morning, she woke up determined. Her sister needed her. And even if she was tired, hurt, and suspicious of everyone around her, Lorelei made a promise to herself. No one's breaking me in here. But what came the next day would break even the strongest. One morning, in one of the long corridors, an older maid quietly pulled her aside and said, "If you're smart, you'll leave while you still can." Lorelei thanked her, but didn't budge. She had been through worse than spoiled rich girls. She'd gone hungry, lost her mother, carried her sister to the ER with no help. The Halden twins thought they were dealing with just another small-town girl who would run at the first sign of trouble. What they didn't know was that Lorelei had nowhere else to go. She wasn't there for a paycheck. She was there to survive and, without knowing it yet, to bring justice. And so, on a quiet morning under a cloudless sky, Lorelei walked down the stairs with her cleaning bucket in hand, ready for another day of staying invisible. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that at that very moment, a twisted plan was already in motion. A test designed by the Halden twins, crafted down to the last cruel detail, disguised as routine. Someone had tampered with her cleaning cart. Something wasn't right with the water in the bucket. What seemed like just another shift would turn into one of the cruelest scenes ever staged in that house. One that would leave scars, literally and unknowingly, spark the biggest lesson of a millionaire's life, the kind who believed everything, even respect, could be bought. The water was cloudy, strangely cloudy. Lorelei, too used to pushing through without time to think, dunked the cloth in anyway. Only when she wrung it out did she feel the sting. A cut, then another. When she looked down, shards of glass sparkled at the bottom of the bucket like sharp little teeth waiting for flesh. Blood dripped quickly. It splattered onto the freshly polished floor. She blinked, confused, like her body didn't quite register what was happening. And then she heard laughter. At the top of the stairs, Arabella was filming. Odette laughed with her hand over her mouth. And then came the phrase that sealed it all. "Clean the floor, Maid." It hit her like a snap. Not because of the physical pain. She already knew what it was like to get hurt. But because for the first time, someone had planned her pain. This wasn't an accident. It was a trap. Premeditated. Cold. Still in shock, Lorelei looked at her bleeding hand, then at the bucket. She turned her gaze to the girls. And suddenly, her heart started racing in a strange way. Not from fear, but from fury. A rage that rushed through her body like fire. Slowly, she stood up, walked to the wall, and with her injured hand, wiped blood across the white stone. A mark. A silent scream. Then, she threw the cloth on the floor with force. "I asked this what you wanted?" she shouted. Her voice echoed through the mansion like thunder in the middle of a clear day. The staff ran to see what was going on. The housekeeper showed up, trembling. Arabella stopped laughing. Odette went pale. Lorelei stared straight at them. "You put broken glass in the water. You film it. You laugh. You're sick." No one expected that outburst. She had never raised her voice before. Always quiet, always smiling. But right then, with her hand bleeding and her soul boiling, something in her snapped. "Stop treating people like trash." That last word came out raw. The pain of someone who'd swallowed one humiliation too many. The housekeeper tried to smooth things over. "Don't do this, Lorelei. You'll regret it." But she didn't. Not in that moment. Because that scene wasn't just about her. It was about all the women who came before her. The ones accused of things they never did. The ones who cried in silence. The ones who left with their heads down. In that scream, Lorelei became all of them. A chorus of voices no one ever heard. And still she was silenced. Taken to the back bathroom. "Stay here until you cool off," they said. Cool off? She was burning on the inside. Alone in that bathroom, she washed her wounds. With every drop of blood falling into the sink, she thought of the video. The laughter. The cruelty. She thought of Ella. Of everything she'd given up to be there. And for the first time, she felt like walking away. Like leaving everything behind. But another thought rose up stronger. The urge to stay. To flip the script. To prove that not every humiliation ends in defeat. She took a deep breath, wrapped her hand in a clean towel, and whispered to herself, "If I walk out now, they win." The twins acted like nothing had happened. They posted selfies, uploaded stories, as if someone else's pain was just entertainment. Camille Halden, the mother, was informed by the housekeeper about the incident. She responded with a single sentence. "They're just being themselves. Don't overreact." And so, with the blessing of an absent mother blinded by her own vanity, the daughters carried on, untouchable, until that moment. Because the video didn't stay in the Ivy League group. A staff member, outraged, leaked it. And that's when things spun out of control. Reactions came in waves. Comments, shares, questions, outrage. But the outside world still had no idea about half of what went on in that mansion. They didn't know who Loralei really was. They didn't know the secret she carried. That night, she came home with her hand bandaged and her heart in pieces. She lay down on the living room floor, exhausted, resting her head on her sleeping sister's stomach. The ceiling seemed to spin. Her mind felt heavy, like the weight of the world was pressing down on her. The silence of the night was so thick, she could hear the old wood creaking around her, as if even the walls couldn't stay still. But miles away, there was another creak. A wire, hidden behind an old bookshelf in the Halden Mansion library, began to overheat. Small, silent, invisible, but with the power to destroy everything. Because sometimes when fire starts, there's no going back. The day started just like any other. Heavy air, arrogant moods, and way too much perfume for someone who lived on her knees. The twins were locked in their bedroom, complaining about the AC temperature. Millionaire Ephraim Halden was setting up a video call with Silicon Valley investors. And Loralei? She was cleaning the library alone, while the other maids avoided her. Not out of fear, but shame. Ever since the glass shard incident, no one had the courage to look her in the eye. It was like her outburst had shaken the very foundation of that silently cruel household. What no one knew was that the real foundations of that house were about to collapse. At 11:42 a.m., the scent of burning would started as a whisper, a warning no one heard. Behind a bookshelf in the library, a wire had snapped, maybe from age, maybe from power overload, or maybe just out of sheer irony. The curtains darkened at the edges. Then came the smoke. First thin, then thick. When the flames touched the carpet, the security system froze. No one could find the keys to the electric control box. The alarms didn't go off. It was as if the mansion was choking in silence. Upstairs, screaming. Odette ran down, coughing. Arabella clutched a designer coat like it was her lifeline. Ephraim shouted for help. People pushed each other in panic. And in the middle of the chaos, someone yelled, "Where's the dog? Where's Spike?" Silence. Panic. He was still trapped upstairs in the twins' bedroom. And no one had the guts to go back. The smoke spread. The heat rose. Loralei stood in the foyer, watching everyone. Her heart pounding, hands still bandaged. Then she ran the other way. Upstairs. The hallway was already thick with smoke. But she knew the house better than anyone there. She cleaned every room, every forgotten corner. She stepped into the bedroom, feeling her way through the haze, and found Spike, shaking behind the curtain. Cradling the dog in her arms, she rushed to the other side of the mansion, where she knew an old emergency staircase had been sealed off. She forced the lock, broke it with her shoulder, and when she emerged, coughing, covered in soot, with the dog still in her arms, silence fell. Everyone froze. She looked like a living statue rising from the ashes. That's when fate made its cruelest, or maybe most poetic, move. As people stood speechless, a firefighter rushed up to her and said, "Whoever shut down the main power saved the entire structure." If the electricity had stayed on, the whole place would have exploded. Ephraim Halden, still dizzy, turned to Loralei. "Was it you?" he asked. She nodded quietly. How did you know how to do that? And then came the moment no one saw coming. With a trembling voice, she replied, I studied electrical engineering. 2 years. Had to drop out to take care of my sister. Her words hit like a revelation. Arabella and Odette glanced at each other, lost for words. No sarcasm, no smirks. For the first time, just silence. The maid they mocked, hurt, humiliated, had just saved their lives. In their home, the millionaire stood speechless, rubbing his face like he was trying to rearrange everything in his head. Because standing before him was a woman with a secret, a gift, a story he never bothered to learn, and who had just saved everything he thought he controlled. The news spread fast. A security camera in the mansion had captured everything. The moment Loralei rescued the dog, the exact second she cut the power, the way she broke through the emergency exit. It was heroism without a spotlight, skill without a degree, knowledge without a title. There were no designer clothes in that footage, no makeup, no big speeches, just soot, dried blood, and a young woman whose eyes didn't shine with glory, but with survival. And that raw truth is what shook everyone who watched. The elite started sharing the video, not out of empathy, but out of shame. Hours later, still covered in smoke and with ash in her hair, Loralei sat on the mansion's front steps and watched the chaos. Fire trucks, reporters, whispers. Everyone wanted to know who she was, and no one had a real answer. Because up until that moment, no one had ever bothered to ask. But now, the name Loralei Boone was no longer invisible. It was headline news, and soon, it would become a symbol of something the mansion had never allowed. Respect. Camille Halden, upon hearing about the fire, sent a short, dry, almost mocking message. They're okay? What a relief. I just hope my Paris painting didn't burn. Not a single word about the housekeeper. No thank you. No mention of courage. As if the fire had only touched walls, not lives. But that evening, as firefighters wrapped up their report and the crowd slowly left, Ephraim Halden sat on the curb, staring at his hands. Dirty, trembling. For the first time, the man who could buy anything had no idea what to do. Right in front of him stood a young woman, wounded, without a degree, no prestigious last name, but who carried a secret, a gift, and something he couldn't buy with all his money. Real courage. And in the silence of that nearly empty street, Ephraim asked a question in a quiet voice, barely looking up. What else has this girl been hiding that I never care to see? The next morning began the way all post-tragedy mornings do in rich neighborhoods. With silence, PR teams scrambling to control the press, and workers cleaning up what the fire left behind. The library was lost. The shelves were ashes. The curtains, nothing but charred threads. But nothing burned more than the collective conscience. Because now, everyone knew who Loralei Boone was. And more importantly, they knew what they had ignored. The media rushed to tell her story, but the fire told it first. The footage hit the internet and went viral in under 2 hours. No edits, no background music, just the truth. Title? The Maid Who Saved the Mansion. Thumbnail? Loralei, covered in soot, dog in her arms, eyes steady. Reaction? Explosive. The comment sections filled with outrage, shame, admiration. A well-known influencer reposted it with a blunt caption. The elite could learn a thing or two from those who clean up after them. And then came more videos. Old ones. The cruelty of the twins. Their jokes about the staff. The incident with the broken glass. It all surfaced like an avalanche of truth no one could bury anymore. The internet reacted like a ruthless court. People demanded justice, called for action. The hashtag Fire the Heiresses shot up to the top trending topics in the country. The story hit national media. One columnist wrote, if it weren't for her, there'd be no house left, and no Halden family reputation either. The pressure on Ephraim skyrocketed. Investors started sending messages. Sponsors requested meetings. What started as a private scandal now threatened the whole empire. And in the face of chaos, he had no choice but to act. He called Loralei in for a private meeting. For the first time, they were face to face with no invisible wall between them. Ephraim looked pale, tired. He tried to begin with a thank you, but the words came out crooked. She just waited. Then, he made her an offer most would dream of. A permanent position in his company's electrical safety division. High salary, full benefits, stability. But Loralei, standing tall, replied, "Thank you, Mr. Halden, but I'd rather start my own business, because now I know what I'm worth." And in that silence, he understood. Some things can't be bought. Some things can't be undone. Her refusal hit like a bomb. Inside the company, executives saw it as a defeat. But to the world watching from the outside, it was the most beautiful victory imaginable. A humble woman, hurt without a degree, saying no to a millionaire on his own turf. A scene no one expected. A scene no one would have written, except life itself. And, as the world tried to make sense of what just happened, Loralei took her first step beyond the Halden mansion walls. A step that wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. It was freeing. Arabella and Odette, hidden upstairs, watched everything from a distance. For the first time, their names weren't symbols of glamour, but of shame. They couldn't walk down the street. People stared with judgment in their eyes. Even their elite friends began to pull away, because nothing spreads faster than scandal, and nothing feels lonelier than the end of impunity. Odette cried. Arabella screamed. Camille, all the way from Paris, sent cold messages. Stop being so dramatic. This will blow over. But it didn't, because now the world knew, and a reckoning had just begun. Before leaving, the mansion's aging, exhausted housekeeper approached Loralei. She handed her an envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter stained with tears. You did what none of us ever had the courage to do. You spoke up for all of us. Thank you. Loralei didn't say a word. She just smiled, her eyes still weary, and tucked the letter into her coat, because there was no room left for hate, only for rebuilding, and silence. The kind of silence that carries dignity. The kind of silence that speaks volumes to those who are willing to listen. Outside, the press was waiting. Cameras. Questions. Desperate for a headline. But she walked right past them. She didn't want a spotlight. She wanted peace. And maybe, just maybe, a fresh start far away from the mansion where so many others have been erased. From the sidewalk, someone shouted, "You're a hero." She stopped, turned slowly, and answered in a steady voice, "I'm a housekeeper." That should have been enough. But what Loralei didn't know was that her story wasn't over yet, and that the consequences of her choice were just beginning, in ways no one could have imagined. The reaction was national. The image of a soot-covered woman with a dog in her arms, emerging from the smoke like an unlikely heroine, was everywhere. Newspapers, magazine covers, emotional social media posts. Loralei Boone, the name no one could pronounce before, now meant courage, resilience, a powerful lesson. Invitations poured in, interviews, tributes, even ad campaigns. But she declined almost all of them. She only accepted what could be turned into help for her sister. No fame, no stage. I don't want to be a celebrity. I just want peace. But peace was the hardest thing to find. In the middle of it all, Ephraim Halden began to change. Not just in posture, but in his eyes. He started appearing in the press less as a tycoon, and more as a visibly shaken man. In meetings, he drifted off. At home, he stared out the window for long stretches. It was clear something had cracked in him. No one knew what. Until that day, at an event hosted by a foundation fighting inequality, Loralei was quietly honored. Unexpectedly, Ephraim showed up. No bodyguards, no press, just a simple gesture. He handed her a small bouquet of white lavender. Loralei was surprised, smiled politely, but said nothing. Yet in his eyes, there was something she didn't expect. Not just gratitude, but vulnerability, admiration, interest. The housekeeper, who watched everything from afar, whispered later, "He looks at you the way he never looked at any of those gala women." But Loralei wasn't naive. She sensed something there, and knew better than to get swept up. She had already learned, not every kind gesture is free of intention. And in that world, the line between admiration and possession was just too thin to ignore. He kept reaching out. First, short messages asking about Ella. Then, an invitation to a thank-you dinner. Loralei declined, kindly, said she was busy, said it wasn't the right time. But he persisted, respectfully, politely, and that began to bother her more than she admitted. Not the dinner itself, but what it symbolized. Because deep down, the millionaire was used to being accepted, and Loralei was the first one to say no, and mean it. When Camille found out about the closeness between them, she called from France. The conversation, they say, was short and poisonous. "You're really falling for someone who used to scrub your floors." Ephraim didn't reply. He simply hung up. Meanwhile, Arabella and Odette were living their worst days yet. By court order, pushed by public pressure, they were sentenced to 6 months of community service at a retirement home. There, they heard the stories of women who had cleaned houses for 40 years, without ever hearing a single thank you. One video leaked. The twins wearing gloves, scrubbing toilets, crying silently. The caption went viral. The heiresses finally got a reality check. For the first time, the public saw the pain of a cleaning lady as more powerful than the sparkle of the elite. Loralei, sitting next to her sister, watched everything unfold, without smiling, without revenge, just absorbing, because she knew that some lessons aren't taught with words. They're lived, and maybe this was the beginning of something bigger than any kind of fame, something that had to do with respect, and a brand new path. A few days later, Loralei opened her small electrical maintenance business. Only women over 40 were hired. "Invisible women perform miracles every day," she said in an interview. The public applauded. A public school in another state hung a banner at the entrance with her name. Women's groups started quoting her as an example. But what she really wanted was just to take her sister to the park without worrying about paying for medication. And finally, that was happening. For the first time, she was starting from scratch, but with her head held high. Ephraim, on the other hand, didn't give up. Not in a pushy way, but he was steady. He sent books, anonymous donations to Ella's clinic, and one letter. Short, straight to the point. "You're the first person who's ever made me want to be better. And that terrifies me, but I won't ignore it." Loralei didn't answer. She folded the letter, put it away, and kept living her life. But something inside her was conflicted. It wasn't about him. It was about what it said about her. Because she had promised herself never to get involved with anyone who looked down on her. And even though he was now on his knees, she still didn't know if this was love or guilt. The following week, an invitation arrived. Award ceremony, Woman of the Year. Public, national. Among the guests, ministers, celebrities, powerful businessmen. And at the top of the program, Ephraim Halden's name. Loralei hesitated. She knew accepting meant exposing herself. She knew he'd be there, and that something could happen on that stage. But what she didn't know was, the millionaire wasn't just planning to applaud her that night. Like this video if the story moved you. Subscribe for more emotional stories of resilience and powerful comebacks. Comment part 2 to find out what happened next.